Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me get emotional for the moment. People always say, it's like, dude, you tend to be pretty cerebral when you're doing your show and all this other stuff. So let me get extraordinarily emotional for the moment. I have this personality flaw, and I suspect a lot of people have this personality flaw, but I tend to return what I get in spades. So if it's love and light and it's good times and good feelings and everything else, I tend to return that in spades. If people are dickish to me, I tend to return that in spades also. I say this to say, like many other lefties, we've been hurt and injured in our relationship with the political apparatus of this country. And this came to a head in the last election, where the person who we really, really wanted to win that election, who we put our hopes into and our cash into, when he was cheated. And it wasn't just the cheating, it was also the wagging the finger. It's this, you guys are just sort of losers, and yes, you need to get behind Hillary Clinton, and if you don't get behind Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump wins and he starts eating babies, and it's going to be your fault that Donald Trump is eating babies. I don't necessarily like being talked to in this way. I don't like having the noise machines turned on me. I don't like being told that because, I don't necessarily like cop shootings, that I'm a bot of Vladimir Putin. I'm being pushed around and manipulated. I don't necessarily like this idea that because I don't necessarily like an imperialist government, that, again, I'm being manipulated and pushed around by Putin and is apparently $100,000 in Facebook ads. So, yeah, we've all been damaged to some degree. I remember as Sanders is crying in the DNC convention and he's weeping, and he gets up and says, support Hillary Clinton. And all of these other people are out there openly weeping. The people who they turn noise machines on, the people who were silenced, the people who they took their signs, the people who they told to shut up and fall in line. These people. Openly weeping. And I remember Democrats thinking that was fucking hilarious. Oh, I remember they thought that was hilarious. Now, I mention this because even though I understand that I have this aspect of myself that when I'm treated in such a way, in such an ill manner, I don't necessarily like that aspect of myself. I will want to be this kind of Zen thing where I could rise above it all and everything else, but that's not really where we are. At least in the arc of my life, I'm not there yet. As to why, let's just say reasons. And so this is effectively where we are. I'm going to run this story because I thought the story was immensely hilarious, comically ridiculous, and I kind of just want to make one very specific, if not snarky and slightly dickish point. Let's take a look at this. Hillary Clinton's approval at a record low. She lost an election, and even after she lost the election, the American public didn't find that she was more humanized by the experience. If anything, they turned around and disliked her even more. Let's look into the story. Former Democrat presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's favorability rating is at a new low 1 year after her election failure to, well, they said lost, me using failure, to President Donald Trump, according to a poll released Tuesday. Clinton now holds a 36% approval rating among Americans, according to Gallup, down 5 percentage points since June. The rating falls below Clinton's previously low of 38% in August to September of last year. The former First Lady also reached a new high disapproval rating of 61%. Clinton has bucked the trend of defeated presidential candidates gaining popularity after the election, Gallup says. This is the interesting part. Clinton's unpopularity rivals Trump's, whose favorability rating remains around 40%, a record low for president at the end of the first year. But the important thing to understand that even though that's a record low for president of the first year, guess who it still beats? One Hillary Clinton. You guys cheated Bernie Sanders and put up somebody who's the weakest possible candidate that you can find in this entire country. I know some people think that she's the strongest person in the universe. The American public disagrees with you. Bill Clinton is also in this list. Bill Clinton has also lost points. And that's mainly because of the thing coming out with women pointing to their accusers and Bill Clinton being somewhat of a sexual maniac. So I don't begrudge a man for, indulging in with willing partners. Let's say that, with willing partners. But the president of the United States having semen on the dress of an intern, a bit undignified. My point with this is, even after Trump took office, even after all the gross things Donald Trump has been doing since he's been in office, even the overtop tweets, even the positioning us with North Korea, even the ridiculousness and the clownishness that takes place in that Oval Office every day, he is an embarrassing person, particularly to be representing this country. And yet, if the election was held today, the one person he can be counted on beating is still Hillary Clinton. When you guys tell me that you're the adults in the room, and you tell me that you guys just need to fall in line and vote for us, we knows what's best. When you guys tell me that you have superdelegates in the process, and yes, it's undemocratic, and yes, it's rigging the process, and yes, it's cheating, but you guys are the adults in the room, and sometimes the public doesn't necessarily make a good choice with regards to who the public wants to run for office. And sometimes the public can choose somebody like a McGovern that gets crushed. So superdelegates are supposed to be the bulwark, the man on the wall, the ones who's protecting the public from making a poor choice. You guys made a poor choice. You guys chose the weakest possible candidate that could be chosen in a contest. And that weakest possible candidate lost to the weakest possible candidate. Well, with the exception of the candidate that you guys put up. And again, even after seeing all the grossness that is Donald Trump, even after all of the stuff Donald Trump has been doing, even after people have been rioting and protesting and all this other stuff, even after all that has come to pass, Donald Trump destroying the EPA, Republicans passing his tax plan, potentially going after Social Security and Medicare, all of these gross, nasty things, that basic Republican policy, even after all this stuff has taken place, when they look back at this contest and they say, well, look, let's do an analysis to figure out if the public, looking at these elements today, what would the public think? The public still looks at this and says, we'll take him. We'll take him. Good job, superdelegates. You chose the right person. When they're going after Medicare, when they're going after Social Security, when they're kicking Obamacare in the knees, when they're doing all this gross stuff, when they're passing these massive tax cuts, when they're killing the EPA, when they're giving all this money to these charter schools, when they're passing these tax cuts on the rich, when they're raising taxes on the poor, just remember, this wasn't purely the Republicans who brought you this. They cheated a guy in the primaries. They prompted the weakest candidate in the history of candidates to run for their party, and the entire time they said it was her turn and that she was inevitable to win. They did everything that they possibly could to put that woman up, even though the American public found her to be the most hated candidate in the history of candidates, with the exception of Donald Trump. And even though the day that Donald Trump got elected, I think it was like 30-something% thought he was capable of serving in the office, meaning you had a minority, a very low minority, that thought he was competent enough to be in that office. They still chose him over Hillary Clinton. I just want to pause right there for a moment because I kind of want this to burn. I want it to burn. No pun intended. No pun intended. So yeah, I'm just giving a story just for reasons. Just for reasons. I will leave it at that. There is no point behind this story other than you're not the adults in the room. And then this idea of this woman making this argument that the public doesn't know what the public is doing when it's trying to pick a choice or pick the choice of a candidate. What this boils down to is the reason you don't game the system, the reason you don't try to rig a system, the reason you don't monkey around with the process is because for all intents and purposes, that process is not there to be perfunctory. It is not your responsibility as a Democratic Party to choose a candidate who you want to go into that office. The process is there to choose the strongest candidate to run in that contest, meaning the strongest candidate to run against the Republican Party or whoever else is running in the election. When you game the system, when you rig the system, sometimes you get the weakest candidate. You've got the weakest candidate. and all of the things that are going to befall us in the next 3 or 4 years in many respects. It's not Susan Sarandon. It's not Jill Stein. It's not Putin. It's not the Russians. It wasn't because blacks weren't sufficiently loyal. It wasn't because Hispanics weren't sufficiently loyal. It wasn't because gays weren't sufficiently loyal. It wasn't because of the weather. It wasn't because Chuck Norris accidentally hit somebody with his car. Whatever, anything else that Hillary Clinton want to bring into this process of trying to say that it was everybody else except for us. We were victims. We were blameless. It wasn't me being a failure. It wasn't me choosing Tim Kaine. It wasn't Obama pushing the TPP at the exact same time when I'm saying I'm not for the TPP, with WikiLeaks showing that she isn't definitely for the TPP. It wasn't the Wall Street speeches. I mean, all of these failures. You ran a contest full well with this idea that the American public would in no way put Donald Trump in that office, using Donald Trump as a gun to the American public's head. And the American public pulled the trigger. Don't let Democrats off the hook for their failures. That's what I want to get at. If this contest was ran today, she'd still lose. That's how unpopular she is. You guys were in a bubble. I know you don't have a paradigm to understand how Hillary Clinton can lose to Donald Trump, but if the contest was held today after all of the gross stuff Donald Trump has done in that office, that woman would lose again. She would fail again. She would have an embarrassing failure again. I will leave it at that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Yes, this is snarky and this is slightly dickish, but reasons. Reasons.